Welcome to our discussion on metric units. Many trades and jobs require, if not the use of, at least a working knowledge of the metric system. And since the US is pretty much the only country, large country still using the US customary system, it's good to learn what everybody else is using. So length, right? We know foot and yards. Well, a meter is the standard unit of length in the metric system, and it's just a little bit bigger than a yard. Once you understand the basic measurements for length, meter, weight, gram, um, and then volume really is just going to be cubic centimeters, but or liter. Everything really comes down to powers of 10 and the old Latin words that mean it. So, for instance, centimeter, which is abbreviated cm, is defined as exactly 1/100th of a meter because centi, in Latin means 100, just like we have 100 cents in the dollar. And then kilo means 1,000. So, kilometer, is 1,000 meters. And then, of course, if you have a centigram, it's 100th of a gram. A kilogram is 1,000 grams. A centiliter, right, is 100th of a liter. And a kiloliter is 1,000 liters, right? So it's really nice because the names of everything make sense. They're all repetition, and it's all based on powers of 10. So you've got kilo, which is 1,000, mega, right, which is a million, giga, which is a billion, and tera, which is a trillion. And then going smaller than one, right, centi is 1/100th, milli is a 1/1000th, then micro is 1 millionth, nano is 1 billionth, and pico is 1 trillionth. And yes, there are other ones. You know, we're missing some powers in here, but they're the less commonly used prefixes. These are the ones that are used most often. And here are some of those that are kind of left out of that table. Hecto is 100 and deca is 10, and then deci is 1/10. And those are really the only three that are left out, but they're left out because they're very rarely used. So as I said before, the standard length, the standard name for a length in the metric system is the meter, and then everything is built off of that. Some examples of what these mean, right? 1 centimeter is roughly the width of a paper clip, and then 1 millimeter is roughly the width of the wire, right? The thickness of the wire that makes up a paper clip. And then, as I said before, a meter is about 10% more than a yard. So it's just a little bit bigger than a yard. Kilometers, right, are going to be pretty similar to miles as far as the scope of how big they are. So things like that help you understand just roughly kind of the scale of these different measurements. Now, converting within the metric system is super easy because everything is just powers of 10, which means all you're doing is moving your decimal place left and right. If you want to convert 348 centimeters to meters, well, you know there's 100 centimeters in a meter, so you're basically just taking 348 and dividing it by 100, which really just means you're moving the decimal place 2 places to the left, and you get 3.48 meters. It really is just that simple, and that's the beauty of the metric system. Converting 7 centimeters to millimeters, well, remember, millimeters 1,000th, centimeters 100, so that means you've got 10 millimeters in a centimeter. So when you go from centimeters to millimeters, it's getting 10 times bigger. You're moving it over to the right by 1, and you go from 7 to 70. Weight is no different, only now we're doing grams, and the basic unit of mass, metric weight in the metric system is the kilogram. That's the one that's kind of used the most. So they don't, gram is the basic, but kilogram is the most commonly used one. Gram, of course, is the basis. So kilogram is 1,000th of those. So if we go in the other direction, a gram is 1,000th of a kilogram, and then you can go on and on down the line from there. So here's some common conversions, right? 1 milligram is 1,000 micrograms, 1 gram is 1,000 milligrams, and 1 kilogram is 1,000 grams, and then 1 metric ton is 1,000 kilograms. So there are two different tons, right? There's the standard ton in the U.S. system, which is 2,000 pounds, and then there's the metric ton, which is 1,000 kilograms. So it kind of sucks that they both have a similar name. Again, converting weights within the metric system is the same as all the others. It's just powers of 10. So you can use fractions with our unity fractions that we've talked about in other videos. Basically, the fraction has to equal 1 because we know 1 gram is the same thing as 1,000 milligrams. So if we multiply something by that fraction, we're really multiplying by 1, and we're not actually changing the size of it. We're just going to change the unit of measure because milligrams will cancel out, and you'll be left with grams, and you get 4.5 grams. But you could also just go, okay, well, milligrams to grams, we know there's 1,000 milligrams in grams. So we're basically divided by 1,000, which means we're just moving the decimal place 3 places to the left. So you go bing, 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 and you get 4.5, right? Another example of going from 0.0062 kilograms to milligrams, you got to figure out that it's a two-step process, right? You go from kilograms to grams and then grams to milligrams. You're just adding a lot of zeros. You're moving the decimal place a bunch of times, and you get 6,200. Because area is basically just the product of two lengths, it's always going to be specified by compound units like, square feet, square miles. Well, same thing with square meters, square kilometers, that kind of thing. But we also have hectares and acres, right? We've talked about those acres with the U.S. Customary system. And a hectare is a square that's 100 meters on each side. So just like we have acres to describe a large chunk of land, they have hectares in the metric system to describe large chunks of land. And you can see that the difference between the two is the hectare is about 2.5 acres. Now a hectare, like we said, is 100 meters times by 100 meters, so it ends up being 10,000 square meters. We can convert 456,000 square meters to hectares very easily by just dividing by 10,000. You get 45.6. Volume and liquid. Well, as I stated, volume and liquid capacity is done in liters. So whether it's a dry volume or a liquid volume, they still talk about liters. But they can also talk about cubic centimeters, normally used for dry volumes. But in any case, 1 liter is defined as 1,000 cubic centimeters. So basically, it's a cube that's 10 by 10 by 10. And then a milliliter, which is 1,000th of a liter, well, you would take that and you would divide, and you get 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, and that's a milliliter. So it's really nice that a cubic centimeter is a milliliter, and then 10 cubic centimeters is a liter. And so here's all that written out for you. If we want to convert from liters to cubic centimeters, again, we just have to remember that a liter is 1,000 cubic centimeters. So you're going to multiply. In the metric system, speeds are normally abbreviated with kmh for kilometers per hour. 100 kilometers per hour is approximately equal to 62. Normally, to make it easier, we talk about 100 is close to 60. So if you ever are traveling overseas, you'll notice that oftentimes their highways have either a 100 or a 110 kilometer per hour maximum speed limit, which is roughly 60 to 70 miles per hour for us, which is what a lot of our highways are at. If you want to convert 136 centimeters per second to meters per minute, remember doing compound units of measure is really easy when you use this concept of the conversion line, right? You just line up all of your fractions. Each fraction is a unity fraction where it equals 1. You start with what you're given, 1360 centimeters over 1 second, because per always means divided by. And then we want to convert into minutes. So we go 60 seconds equals 1 minute. So there's my next fraction. Of course, we put seconds on top, so it will cancel the seconds down below. And the next one is we want to convert our centimeters to meters. So we need centimeters down here to cancel with the one that's on top. And that conversion unity factor is 100 centimeters in a meter. And you can see that everything cancels out except for meters and minutes. So you do the math, you multiply across the top, divide by the numbers on the bottom, and you get 806 meters per minute. Temperature, we have the Celsius temperature range. And the nice thing about the Celsius scale is it was created based on when water freezes and boils. On the US scale, water freezes at 32 and boils at 212. Makes no freaking sense. But on the Celsius scale, it freezes at 0 and boils at 100. So again, it just makes more sense to put everything on that, scale of powers of 10. Some applications of metric units. Well, if a patient takes 60 milligrams of a medication 3 times a day, how many grams will the patient take in 4 days? Well, 60 milligrams per dose, 3 doses per day times 4 days, right? You'll get 60 times 3 times 4, 720 milligrams. Then you can convert milligrams to grams, and they get 0.72 grams in that 4 days. Length of a scale component given 8.6 centimeters. What's the greatest possible error of this measurement in millimeters? Well, to solve this, we have to remember that the greatest possible error of a measurement is always half the precision. In this case, the precision is 0.1 centimeters, right? It goes to 1 decimal, so 1/10 of a centimeter. So the greatest possible error is half of that 0.1 centimeter, or 0.05 centimeters. Then we convert that to millimeters, knowing that 1 centimeter is 10 millimeters. You do 10 times 0.05, and you get half of a millimeter. So the greatest possible error for this measurement is half of a millimeter. And that's usually what everything's going to be, because wherever you stop, right, the next one down is going to be the next measurement. So it's going to be half of the next measurement. Cruising speed of a 787 is 0.85 of a Mach, meaning 0.85 times the speed of sound. If the speed of sound at cruising altitude is 295 meters per second, what's the cruising speed? Well, that's easy. We're just going to go 295 times 0.85 and get our answer that way. We don't have to worry about all these fancy fractions. A very active adult who wishes to maintain their weight of 120 pounds on a diet of 2,300 calories. A nutritionist advised her to limit her intake of saturated fat to no more than 7%. Fat contains 9 calories per gram. To determine the maximum number of grams of saturated fat she should consume per day, you'd have to do all these steps, right? So you have to use proportion to calculate these things. We have how much of her 2,300, right, is going to equal 7%. So if we want to solve for P, it's going to be 2,300 times 7 divided by 100, and that's 161 calories per day from saturated fat. That's easy, right, to find the calories. But then we have to take it a step further and go, okay, now that we know the calories, 161 calories per day, they tell us that 1 gram has 9 calories. So we cancel out calories, and we get roughly 17.88 grams per day. So if they stay to 17 grams per day, they won't go over their recommended fat intake. The most common unit for measuring contaminants in water is milligrams per liter. So in the field of water treatment, this is defined as being equivalent to parts per million. So that is, we know that 1 milligram divided by a liter is 1 part per million. So when very, very small amounts are measured, they are reported in units of micrograms per liter or parts per billion. So whenever you hear these things, it's parts per million just means, 1 out of a million, and then you can also have parts per billion. So we suppose that a particular contaminant was measured at a level of 0.21 parts per million, and we need to report this as micrograms per liter. Well, we know that 0.21 parts per million is equal to 0.21 milligrams per liter, because that's what parts per million is defined as, right? It's 1 milligram over a liter. So to convert this to milligrams per liter, we only need to convert milligrams to micrograms. Sorry, to convert it to micrograms per liter, we just have to do that one conversion. So we have this 0.21 milligrams for every 1 liter, and then we know there's 1,000 micrograms in every milligram. The milligrams cancel, so we're basically multiplying by 1,000, and we get 210 micrograms per liter. A couple other examples in working with intravenous infusions, right, IVs. Nurses often have to figure out flow rates in drops or microdrops per minute, while the solution itself is measured in millimeters. Suppose that 750 milliliter IV must be given to a patient over a period of 6 hours, and the nurse must set the flow rate in drops per minute. Now, if the drop factor for this solution is 15 drops per milliliter, right? So every solution will have a different drop factor depending on the viscosity of it. In the case of this, 15 drops equate to a milliliter. So they have to figure out how many drops they have, right? Well, they got 750 milliliters that they have to give in 6 hours, and there are 15 drops per milliliter, so now they know how many drops they have to do in 6 hours. Then they take 1 hour and divide it by 60 minutes, so now they're going to get drops per minute, and they know there's 31.25 drops per minute. In practicality, they would round it down to 31 drops per minute, and it would just take a little bit more than 6 hours to take in the whole IV. You normally don't want to round up to give them more than what the recommended dosage is. So here is a table that summarizes some of the conversion factors we've looked at, right? A centimeter is 10 millimeters, a meter is 100 centimeters, and so on and so forth. There are other missing ones, right, that we don't use as often. These are kind of the most commonly used metric conversions when we are converting within the metric system. If you want to convert from the metric system to the US system, it's actually really easy because, as we've seen, everything in the metric system relates back to a centimeter, right? Every length can be written in terms of centimeters, and then every volume can be listed in terms of centimeters. And then grams, right? Weight is the only one that can't be done in centimeters. So I lied, not everything. But length, area, and volume can all be done with terms of centimeters, including liquid volume, because we have a liter is 1,000 centimeters. So the international community agreed that 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters. That's not an approximation, that's an exact thing. And so you can now take any US measure for length or area or volume, because our liquid volumes are related to cubic inches, and you can convert all of those into inches, and then you can go across the bridge and convert your inches into centimeters, and then you can take those centimeters and convert them back up to whatever you need, a large length, an area, or a volume. So this is the bridge that allows the US system and the metric system to talk to each other. And then the only other one we need is weights. And so we have 2.2 pounds equals 1 kilogram. And those are the only two you need, other than temperature, for the Celsius to Fahrenheit. But those are the two biggies that will convert everything, and that's all I've got for you.